Now to a developing story. Cobb County Police say the boyfriend of a woman they were searching for confessed to killing her, and he's now in custody. Channel 2's Corey James is outside Cobb County Police headquarters with the family's reaction.
You're looking at 56-year-old Cecil McCreary. Cobb County Police say he confessed to killing 45-year-old Tange Davis and burying her body in Atlanta. It is devastating news for loved ones who were clinging to hope that Davis will be found alive.
She was strangled. She's just a beautiful person. You know, she worked really, really hard.
Family members say they are not surprised McCreary is in custody for Davis's death.
This is not the first time that he's abused a woman.
In fact, court documents show last October McCreary was arrested and charged with aggravated assault and kidnapping Davis. He was ordered to stay away from her. However, officials say that was violated when Davis moved back into McCreary's home in Mapleton.
We never knew of the abuse. We're just finding all of this out.
Just be aware of what's going on. If you got a feeling, go with it.
Meantime, while loved ones are heartbroken over the loss, they are thankful for the community's support.
I just want the ladies, the women who have gone through abuse with him to make this case stronger. Please come forward.
It was a quiet Thursday night in Mapleton, Georgia, the kind of evening where porch lights flicker and the hum of passing cars fades into the background. Inside her silver SUV, 45-year-old Tange Davis was on her way to see someone she thought she knew better than anyone else. Her boyfriend, Cecil McCreary. She told her family she'd be right back. But that night, she never came home. 2 days later, her son sat staring at his phone, worried sick. His calls went straight to voicemail. Text messages were left on delivered, but never read. Something didn't feel right. His mom never ignored him. So, he did something desperate, something no child should ever have to do. He used her OnStar tracking system to find her car. The signal led him to a little grocery store parking lot in Mapleton. Her SUV was there, but empty and silent. At first, police treated it as a missing persons case. Maybe she just needed time away, they said. Maybe she'd show up. But her family insisted Tange wouldn't disappear. She was a mother. She had plans. She had people waiting on her. The truth was darker than anyone could imagine. Behind the quiet facade of that Georgia neighborhood, something unthinkable had already happened. The man she trusted, the man she loved, had done the unimaginable. As the investigation began, officers paid a visit to Cecil McCreary's home. Calm, polite, and composed, he told them he'd last seen Tange leaving his house a few nights earlier. He even showed them security footage, proof, he said, that she'd walked away on her own. But there was something off. The timeline didn't add up. And those who knew Tange best could feel it in their gut. Something was wrong. Days passed, and the worry turned to panic. Flyers went up. Calls flooded the police department. The community searched wooded areas, ditches, and nearby parks. Everyone was praying for a miracle. Then the news broke. McCreary, the same man who'd opened his door to investigators and looked them in the eye, confessed. He admitted to killing Tange Davis and burying her body in Atlanta. Just hours later, police recovered her remains from the exact spot he described. That confession shattered hearts across Georgia. But it also raised a haunting question. How did this happen? Because McCreary wasn't just any man. He was already out on bond for kidnapping and aggravated assault when Tange vanished. It wasn't the first time he'd been accused of violence. For Tange's family, those facts only deepened the pain. They had trusted the system to keep her safe. Instead, it failed her, just like it has failed so many others. This is the story of Tange Davis, a woman whose disappearance exposed deep cracks in how we handle domestic violence. A story of love turned deadly, of missed warnings, and of a family left to search for justice long after the cameras stopped rolling. Because behind every headline is a heartbeat that once was. And tonight, we tell hers. Welcome to Lat True Crime Stories. I am your host. Today we are breaking down one of the most twisted cases you've ever seen. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, and leave your comment to tell us where you're watching from. Let's build this community together. Now let's get into it. Before her name became the center of headlines, Tange Davis was simply known as a woman who loved deeply and lived quietly. To those who knew her best, she was the dependable one, the kind of person who checked in on her friends, made time for family, and always carried herself with a calm, graceful energy. She was 45, a mother, a sister, and a friend. Her smile came easily, and her words were steady, but behind that strength was a woman who had fought hard for stability and peace in her life. Tange lived in Mableton, Georgia, a suburban community just outside of Atlanta. A place where neighbors wave at each other across driveways and everyone knows who's cooking on the grill by the smell in the air. She wasn't famous, wealthy, or flashy. She worked hard, minded her business, and spent her free time surrounded by family. To her loved ones, she was the glue that held everyone together. And then there was Cecil McCrary. To outsiders, Cecil seemed like a charming, confident man, the kind who smiled easily and knew how to say the right things. But to those who looked a little closer, something about him didn't sit right. He was known to be controlling, possessive, and beneath that surface charm was a history that most people never saw. He had a criminal record, one that included kidnapping and aggravated assault, but Tange, perhaps believing in second chances, decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. She wanted to believe that people could change. Their relationship began like many others, full of laughter, long conversations, and promises of a future together. For a while, it seemed like they might actually build something lasting. But those closest to Tange noticed a shift. She became quieter about her personal life, more cautious in her words. Friends noticed that she didn't talk about Cecil the way she used to. When asked how things were going, she'd smile and say, "We're fine." But the tone in her voice didn't quite match the words. Behind closed doors, Tange was navigating something darker. There were moments of tension, small arguments that turned into larger confrontations. And there were times when she wanted to leave, but anyone who's lived through a controlling relationship knows it's never that simple. There's love, fear, hope, and the belief that maybe, just maybe, things will get better. In early 2025, those close to her began noticing signs of unease. She was still herself, loving and grounded, but there was something heavy in her demeanor. When she told her family she was heading out to see Cecil that evening, it didn't raise immediate alarms. She'd been with him before, and despite their ups and downs, no one expected danger. It was just another night, or so they thought. Hours passed. Then a day. Then two. When Tange didn't return home, her loved ones knew something was wrong. She was responsible to a fault. She didn't just disappear. Her phone was off, unusual for someone who always stayed in touch. Her son tried calling over and over again, hoping for a ringtone, a message, anything. Instead, he was met with silence. That's when he remembered her car had OnStar tracking, a feature that could locate her vehicle no matter where it was.
Missing person signs of Tange Davis can be seen across Mableton. They were posted by worried family members desperate to find her. Davis had last been seen by her family October 9th. Her son told investigators he found her car in this parking lot on Floyd Road. Cobb County Police issued an alert Tuesday saying the Major Crimes Unit was trying to find the 45-year-old and determine the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. They asked for the public's help, hoping someone with information would come forward. A day later, investigators delivered the devastating news that no one wanted to hear. Tange Davis was dead. Police say during an interview with Davis's boyfriend, 56-year-old Cecil McCrary, he admitted to killing Davis and burying her body in Atlanta. Cobb investigators worked with APD. They went to the location McCrary gave them and discovered Davis's body. In a statement, Cobb Police Chief Dan Farrell said, "Our hearts are with her family, and we're reminded that behind every statistic is a person, a mother, a friend, a colleague whose life mattered."
Detectives began to dig deeper. They ran his background and found what her family didn't know in full, a record of violent offenses. He wasn't a first-time offender, and at the time of Tange's disappearance, he was out on bond for kidnapping and assault. It was a chilling revelation that made everything suddenly make sense. The tension, the secrecy, the unease that had crept into her life in those final weeks. Still, there was no physical evidence tying him to her disappearance. Without a body, investigators had little to go on besides suspicion and instinct. Her family held on to hope that she might be alive somewhere, hurt but still breathing. They organized search parties, shared her photo across social media, and begged for tips. The story spread throughout Georgia, igniting both fear and sympathy. News outlets picked it up. Her smiling face appeared on TV screens, on Facebook posts, on flyers stapled to telephone poles. Missing mother of Mableton, the headlines read. But beneath that hope, the truth was already written. While volunteers combed the woods and fields, Cecil McCrary knew exactly where she was. And as the days turned into nights, that silence, that unbearable, empty silence, was the only answer her family had. Tange's story wasn't just another missing person case. It was a warning about the danger of ignoring red flags, of how love can blind even the strongest hearts, and how systems built to protect often fail when it matters most. Her disappearance was the spark that would ignite a deeper investigation, one that would soon uncover the devastating truth behind her final moments. The days following Tange Davis's disappearance felt like a blur of confusion, fear, and sleepless nights. Her family and friends refused to give up. Every phone call made hearts skip, every social media alert raised hope that maybe, just maybe, someone had seen her. But as hours turned into days, the weight of dread began to settle over Mableton like a heavy fog. Investigators continued their interviews, retracing Tange's last known steps. Her phone data revealed the final location it pinged before going silent, near Cecil McCrary's home. That alone wasn't proof of wrongdoing, but it pointed in one undeniable direction. Detectives brought McCrary in for more questioning. At first, his demeanor was calm, almost unnervingly so. He repeated the same story, "She left my house that night. I don't know where she went after that." He claimed their evening had been uneventful, that they talked briefly before she decided to leave. He said he tried calling her later but got no answer. His tone was smooth, measured, almost rehearsed. But the investigators had seen it before, the calmness that comes not from innocence, but from control. The way he spoke wasn't of a man worried about his missing girlfriend. It was the voice of someone trying to guide the narrative. Detectives dug deeper. They subpoenaed his phone records, analyzed timestamps, and compared them to Tange's digital footprint. The timelines didn't match. At one point when McCrary claimed he was home alone, his phone location data showed him traveling miles away, toward Atlanta, in the direction where her body would later be found. When investigators pressed him on the inconsistencies, his tone changed. He became defensive, irritated. "You're trying to make me out to be something I'm not," he told them. "I loved her." But the more he talked, the less it sounded like love. Behind the scenes, Tange's family kept fighting. Her son, devastated but determined, spoke to the media. "My mom wouldn't just disappear," he said, his voice cracking during one interview. "Someone did something to her." He was right. Police began searching areas around Atlanta and Mableton, wooded lots, abandoned buildings, rural roadsides. They brought in K-9 units, drones, and ground teams. Each new lead ended in heartbreak. Then, nearly a week after she vanished, the case took a chilling turn. During another interview with McCrary, detectives laid out what they'd found: conflicting phone data, holes in his timeline, inconsistencies in his story. The room went quiet.
The judge presided over Cecil McCrary's bond hearing. It was his first appearance where he was formally arraigned on his charges, including murder.
McCrary is accused of killing his girlfriend, Tange Davis. Her body was found in a makeshift grave in Atlanta earlier this week.
11 Alive's Cody Alcorn live outside the Cobb County Jail in Marietta. And Cody, you sat in on McCrary's bond hearing. How would you describe his demeanor?
Honestly, pretty cold. He seemed really unbothered by all of it. He sat there in handcuffs, and the judge actually spoke to him, asking him if he understood the charges, and he seemed to understand everything except the murder charge. When the judge asked if he understood that charge, he said no, and then mumbled under his breath that it's not true. However, in these warrants, Cobb County Police allege something much different. Warrants paint a violent encounter inside this Mableton home on Thursday, October 9th. Cobb County Police say Cecil McCrary strangled his girlfriend Tange Davis to death. He's then accused of wrapping her body in plastic and duct tape before police say he drove about 8 miles, where they say McCrary dug a grave here along Boulder Park Drive in Atlanta and buried Davis in the wood line. In an effort to cover up his crime, police say McCrary drove Davis's vehicle to this Lidl right around the corner from his home and left it. Police say 2 days later, Davis's son, using OnStar, tracked his mom's vehicle to the grocery store's parking lot. As their suspicions grew, police released this bolo poster on October 14th. Hours after it hit the news and social media, police arrested McCrary, who they say admitted to strangling Davis during a fight. And I mentioned he did seem unbothered. In fact, the judge asked him at one point how he's doing tonight, and he told the judge, great. But again, despite him saying during that quick court hearing that he did not do this, these warrants allege that he admitted to doing this horrific crime. Ron and Jennifer?
Cody, we've seen a lot of outrage in this case because, unfortunately, there's a history of domestic violence in this relationship.
That's right. In fact, domestic violence is written on this warrant, and there's a lot of outrage about this case. Many people thinking that the system here failed Tange Davis because what we have learned is that he was out. We're talking about McCrary. He was out on pre-trial release. I mean, he was on the ballot, he was on the system to go into a trial for domestic violence charges involving this victim. Now, Cobb County Police also confirming to us that they have responded to multiple domestic violence calls involving this couple. So again, still a lot of unanswered questions in this horrific case. Live in Cobb County, Cody Alcorn, 11 Alive News.
All right, Cody, thank you.
McCrary leaned back in his chair, eyes darting toward the floor. The silence stretched long enough to make everyone uneasy. Then he exhaled and said 5 words no one expected to hear. "I'll tell you where she is." Those words shattered the tension in the room. What followed was a confession that sent shockwaves through everyone connected to the case. McCrary admitted that he had killed Tange Davis. According to his account, they'd argued that night, the kind of argument that had happened before, but this time it escalated beyond control. In his version of events, he claimed it was an accident, that he lost his temper. He said he panicked afterward, not knowing what to do, so he drove her body to Atlanta and buried it. He gave investigators the exact location. Within hours, officers were dispatched to the site, a remote area overgrown with weeds and brush. And there, just as he said, they found Tange's remains. When word reached her family, the cries that filled the air were gut-wrenching. Her son collapsed in disbelief, screaming her name through tears. Friends who had clung to hope now faced the unimaginable truth. The woman they'd prayed for was gone, taken by the very man she had once loved. The discovery ignited a storm of emotion throughout the community. How could this have happened? How could someone with a violent past be free to harm again? It wasn't just grief, it was outrage. Reporters gathered outside the Cobb County Sheriff's Office. Cameras flashed as officers confirmed that McCrary had been charged with murder, aggravated assault, and concealing the death of another. During his arrest, he showed little emotion. No tears, no remorse, no words. Inside the family's home, the mood was different. Photos of Tange lined the mantel, smiling pictures from birthdays, family barbecues, holidays filled with laughter. Every image felt like a memory frozen in time, now tainted by the knowledge of what had happened. Her sister spoke through tears. She just wanted love. That's all. She didn't deserve this. In the days that followed, new details began to emerge. Prosecutors revealed that McCrary had been out on bond for kidnapping and aggravated assault when he met Tange. He should have been behind bars. But like so many others in the system, he slipped through the cracks, free to repeat the cycle of violence. The revelation deepened the heartbreak. Tange's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a failure of protection. She had unknowingly placed her trust in someone who had already proven dangerous, and the justice system had given him the opportunity to do it again. The case quickly gained attention across Georgia and beyond. Online, people demanded accountability.
You're looking at 56-year-old Cecil McCrary. Cobb County Police say he confessed to killing 45-year-old Tange Davis and burying her body in Atlanta. It is devastating news for loved ones who were clinging to hope that Davis will be found alive.
She was strangled. She's just a beautiful person. You know, she worked really, really hard.
Family members say they are not surprised McCreary is in custody for Davis's death.
This is not the first time that he's abused a woman.
In fact, court documents show last October McCreary was arrested and charged with aggravated assault and kidnapping Davis. He was ordered to stay away from her. However, officials say that was violated when Davis moved back into McCreary's home in Mapleton.
We never knew of the abuse. We're just finding all of this out.
Just be aware of what's going on. If you got a feeling, go with it.
Meantime, while loved ones are heartbroken over the loss, they are thankful for the community's support.
I just want the ladies, the women who have gone through abuse with him to make this case stronger. Please come forward.
Advocates for domestic violence victims spoke out, emphasizing how warning signs are often overlooked until it's too late. Others shared their own stories of surviving controlling relationships, using Tange's name as a rallying cry for change. Meanwhile, detectives continued to build their case. They analyzed McCreary's confession against the evidence, the timeline, phone data, and forensic findings. Everything aligned with his admission. There was no doubt left. But for the people who loved Tange, knowing the truth didn't bring peace. It only deepened the ache. Her son could barely sleep, replaying that night over and over, wondering if there was something more he could have done, a call he could have made, a question he could have asked. Her friends struggled with guilt, thinking of the times they'd seen her withdraw but hadn't pressed harder to ask why. The emotional fallout was immense. Her disappearance had left a void, her death left a wound that would never fully heal. Yet even amid the grief, there was a collective sense of determination, a resolve to make sure her story wasn't just another statistic. For law enforcement, the case was both heartbreaking and infuriating. One detective later said, "It wasn't just the act itself, it was how preventable it was. She didn't have to die." As McCreary sat in custody awaiting trial, the public's attention turned to the larger issue, how someone with such a violent past could be free. The outrage grew. Local news stations held segments on domestic violence reform, interviewing advocates who urged stricter bail conditions for repeat offenders. Through it all, one truth echoed louder than any other: love should never be dangerous. And for Tange Davis, a woman whose kindness and trust were exploited by the wrong person, that truth would become her legacy. A painful reminder of how thin the line can be between love and tragedy. Her story wasn't over yet. The final act, the fight for justice, the courtroom battles, and the emotional reckoning was still to come. The courthouse in Cobb County, Georgia, was thick with tension the morning of the hearing. Reporters gathered at the steps, their cameras fixed on the doors where Cecil McCreary would soon appear in shackles, the man accused of killing Tange Davis. Inside, her family filled the rows of the courtroom, dressed in black. Her son sat in the front, hands clasped tightly, his face a mask of quiet rage and unbearable loss. Behind him, her friends whispered prayers under their breath. Everyone waited for justice, not the kind written in statutes, but the kind that brings peace to shattered hearts. When McCreary was led in, there was a hush. He looked smaller now, stripped of the arrogance that once fueled him. His orange jumpsuit hung loose, his eyes downcast. The man who had once controlled, manipulated, and destroyed now stood powerless before the very system he had defied. The prosecutor's voice cut through the silence. "This is not a story of love gone wrong," she began. "This is a story of control, of violence, and of a woman who trusted someone she should have been protected from." She laid out the timeline piece by piece, the calls, the arguments, the lies, and finally, the confession. Photos of Tange's smiling face appeared on the courtroom screen, her laughter frozen in time, her warmth immortalized in pixels. And then came the images from the crime scene. Gasps filled the room. Tears fell. Her son couldn't look. The defense tried to soften the blow, arguing that McCreary hadn't planned the killing, that it was a crime of passion, a tragic mistake. But no one in that courtroom saw it as a mistake. This wasn't passion. It was possession. When McCreary took the stand, his words were hollow. He spoke of regret, but his tone betrayed none. He said he'd lost control, that he never meant to hurt her. But those who had known Tange felt the sting of his lies all over again. Her sister whispered to a friend, "He meant every bit of it." The prosecutor didn't let him hide. "You buried her," she said, voice sharp as glass. "You left her alone in the dirt, the woman you claimed to love. That is not loss of control. That is choice." The courtroom was silent again. Even McCrary's eyes flickered. For a moment, maybe guilt, maybe just the realization that there was no way out. After weeks of proceedings, the jury deliberated for less than a day. When they returned, the air was heavy enough to crush a heartbeat. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree." A collective exhale filled the room, a sound caught between relief and sorrow. McCrary's head dropped. Tange's family embraced, crying openly. Her son wept into his hands. It wasn't victory, there's no victory in a loss like this, but it was something close to justice. At sentencing, the judge looked McCrary dead in the eyes. "You took a life that trusted you. You destroyed a family. You buried a woman who only ever wanted love. For that, you will spend the rest of your life behind bars." Life without parole. The courtroom erupted in quiet sobs. The gavel came down, sealing his fate. Outside, the sky was gray, rain threatening to fall. Tange's family gathered on the courthouse steps. Cameras swarmed, microphones extended. Her sister spoke first. "We're thankful for justice, but nothing brings her back. My sister deserved to live. She deserved to grow old, to see her grandbabies, to laugh again. We'll never forget her, and we'll fight so that no other woman has to live this nightmare." Her words rippled through the community. In the weeks that followed, local groups organized candlelight vigils in Tange's name. Her picture, radiant smile, confident eyes, became a symbol of resilience and awareness. People held signs that read, "Justice for Tange," and "Stop the Cycle of Abuse." On social media, her story spread beyond Georgia. Strangers who had never met her shared her image, her name, her voice. Survivors of domestic violence began using the hashtag #TangeDavisStory to share their own experiences, each one a haunting echo of what she had endured. Tange's son, though broken, became her loudest advocate. He spoke at schools, community meetings, and shelters, urging women to recognize the signs of control before they turn deadly. "My mom's gone," he would say, "but if her story saves even one life, she didn't die for nothing." The transformation of grief into purpose became the heartbeat of her legacy. But behind the activism and the media coverage, there was still quiet pain. Nights where her family sat in her living room surrounded by photos and candles, her laughter playing from old phone videos. Moments where her sister picked up her phone just to scroll through their last text conversation, rereading the words over and over. "Love you, sis. I'll call you tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. And yet, the power of her story continued to move people. Reporters revisited the case months later, focusing on the systemic failures that allowed McCrary to roam free despite his violent past. Lawmakers began debating reforms to Georgia's bail system, questioning why repeat offenders were given the chance to hurt again. In this way, Tange's name became a catalyst, not just for memory, but for change. As for McCrary, his life behind bars faded into the shadows of time. No one spoke his name anymore. The world had moved on, not forgetting, but refusing to give him the power he once held. What remained was Tange, her light, her voice, her story. Tange Davis wasn't just a headline. She was a mother, a sister, a friend, a woman who laughed loud, loved deeply, and trusted too easily. Her story isn't only about how she died, it's about how she lived, and how her life, cut short by violence, became a mirror for so many others trapped in silence. Every year, thousands of women in America suffer at the hands of someone who once said, "I love you." They stay because of fear, because of hope, because of the belief that things will change. But as Tange's story shows, sometimes love isn't safe. Sometimes the danger isn't outside your home, but sitting right beside you. If you or someone you know is trapped in an abusive or controlling relationship, please, don't wait. Reach out. There is help. There is life beyond fear. Because silence saves no one. And every voice raised in warning might just save a life. Thank you for watching this story. If Tange's journey moved you, if it opened your eyes to the danger of hidden violence, please Share this video. Help her story reach someone who needs it. Someone who might still have time. Don't forget to subscribe for more true crime documentaries that seek not only to tell the story, but to tell the truth. Because behind every case number is a human life.